Hello everyone, welcome to the daily editorial analysis brought to you by Shankar IAS Academy, 3rd December 2024. Displayed here are the list of articles that we will be discussing today. The first article, Frontline Nutrition Workers Foster Disability Inclusion. And this article is taken from the newspaper The Hindu, which is talking about the role of Anganwadi workers and Asha workers in creating an inclusive society for differently abled people. We know that the 3rd December every year is observed as International Day for the people with a disability, and in this article we will be also discussing the relationship between malnutrition and the disability and what can be done, how the community intervention helps us to create an inclusive society for disabled people. And the second article is fairness, not just speed. This article is taken from the newspaper Indian Express. This article is talking about the challenges in the Indian judiciary, especially the pendency of cases and how it is impacting the efficiency of the judiciary. So without much delay, let's get into the discussion. Frontline nutrition workers foster disability inclusion. We know that every year 3rd December is observed as the International Day for persons with disabilities. And in this context, we have an editorial article from the newspaper The Hindu, which is talking about two important aspects related to disability inclusion. The first part of this article is talking about the relationship between malnutrition and the disability, while the second part of this article is talking about the role of the frontline workers, that is the Asha workers and Anganwadi workers, in creating an inclusive society for people living with disabilities. So without much delay, let's begin the discussion from the main point of view. So first we are going to see the relationship between the malnutrition and the disability. So first part we will be seeing the how the malnutrition is leading to disability. So malnutrition, we know that the nutrition imbalance in a person's body is defined as malnutrition. That can be excess nutrition or there can be a nutrition deficit. Both are imbalanced. And in this case, we have to understand a concept called the prenatal malnutrition. What is meant by prenatal malnutrition? Prenatal means before the childbirth. That means the malnutrition that a mother has before giving birth to a child. And if the mother is suffering from nutritional deficiency, then definitely it will have impact on the children. For example, if the mother is suffering from folic acid deficiency, then it can lead to neural tube defects in the children. For example, what is this neural tube? A neural tube actually is a narrow channel that develops during when the baby is in the mother's womb, and this will look like a small channel, and the upper part of this neural tube will develop into skull and brain, while the lower part will develop into spinal cord. If the mother is suffering from folic acid deficiency, then this neural tube defects will happen to the child, and it can lead to various other complications. And other issues related to the prenatal malnutrition is the low birth weight and delayed developments. And iron and iodine deficiencies can lead to delayed or problems associated with brain development. Coming to the micronutrient deficiencies, the vitamin A deficiency can lead to blindness, while the folate deficiency can lead to, like I mentioned in the before, neural tube defects. Coming to the chronic malnutrition, the chronic malnutrition can lead to other issues such as stunted growth and delayed cognitive development among the children. And the malnutrition can also weakens the children's immunity system and makes them vulnerable to infection and diseases. So this is how the malnutrition causes disability. And coming to the second part, how the disability exacerbates malnutrition or nutrition challenges. The first major issue is the feeding and digestive issues. For example, the people suffering from cerebral palsy or Down syndrome may face difficulty in chewing, swallowing, and digestion. And the second part, it is the social and economic barriers. That means the people with disabilities may face certain social stigma which limits their access to nutrition services. And if that disabled person is from an economically backward family or area, then it will become more difficult for them to afford a nutritious diet. Now we are going to see what is the importance of addressing the nutrition for people living with disabilities. First one is the improved health outcomes. For example, we can prevent the secondary complications associated with the disability they already have. For example, like I mentioned in the previous slide, the people with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome may face problem in digestion and chewing. So therefore they may face problems of nutritional deficiency. Certain nutrients will not be available for them. So in that case, if we can address such issues, then we can prevent the secondary complications associated with such a nutrition deficiency. And then social inclusion, that is facilitates better education, employment, and social life. so we can create an harmonious society for them. And then reduced disability rates. For example, certain disabilities can be prevented or mitigated if we can identify them in the early stage of the child development. And recently the Haryana government is giving immense training to the Anganwadi workers and Asha workers to identify the nutritional and other disability issues in the children at the early stage. Now we are going to see the role of Anganwadi workers in creating an inclusive society for the people living with the disabilities. First one is the ICDS implementation. We know that integrated child development scheme, and it is focusing on the health, nutrition and the welfare of mother, children and lactating mothers, right? And they are providing nutrition tablets, they are providing nutrition powders to the mother before and after the childbirth, and the children also will receive the adequate nutrition attention from the Anganwadi workers if they are under the age of 6. And the next is the early detection. For example, the portion tracker. Actually, this is developed by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and this tracker will help us to track the nutrition status of women, adolescent girls, mothers, lactating mothers and children. And service access, that includes access to medical, education and welfare support. And then government schemes, that is the Anganwadi workers and the Anganwadi institutions are assisting the families to register for certain pensions, for example the national disability pension and all. So in this way the Anganwadi workers are playing a prominent role in creating an inclusive society for people with the nutrition deficiency and at the same time people suffering from disabilities. Now we are going to see the disability inclusive guidelines. The first is the Divyang protocol, which came in the year 2023. It is focusing on early identification, and this Divyang protocol, it is focusing on training the Anganwadi workers to identify the the disability at the early stage of a child. So therefore we can prevent the complications or secondary complications associated with that. And then we have a podcast called Nanhe Perishati, and this podcast, it's an initiative of the state of Haryana, which is focusing on creating awareness and the stigma reduction that the people with a disability facing in the society. And coming to the next community based intervention, that is the partnerships and innovations, that is the collaboration of the World Food Program with the Anganwadi workers in capacity building. And at the same time we are also using technologies such as geospatial tools, digital tracking and video conferencing to streamline the nutrition and health services across the nation. Now we are going to see broader recommendations for disability inclusive nutrition. What can be done to make the society more inclusive for people with a disability? First one is the infrastructure and services. We have to bring a lot of changes there. For example, increasing the number of trained therapists for cerebral palsy, autism and all, and establishment of the accessible schools and healthcare and transport facilities and affordable assistive devices for the people suffering from or dealing with the disabilities. And then tailored nutrition services. For example, tailored nutrition means particular nutrition guidelines for specific disabilities, and fortified food for to reduce the problem of micronutrition deficiency. And then addressing social barriers, it is very important. It is very important because without that we cannot create an inclusive society. And the first is community awareness to dispel the myth related to the disability, and involvement or the ensuring the participation of people living with the disabilities in the mainstream of the society. Next is policy integration, that is creating an inclusive policy or an integrated policy that aligns health, nutrition and disability. And next is ensuring disability inclusion in public health strategies. Now we are going to see the legislative framework that we have in India that ensures the welfare for people living with disabilities. First one is Rights of People with Disabilities Act 2016, and this act replaces the previous act that existed in that was enacted in the year 1995. And this new act recognizes nearly 21 types of disabilities and strengthens the reservation policy. For example, 4% of reservation in the government jobs and 5% of reservation for disabled people in education. And at the same time, it is working towards an inclusive society through promoting, accessible public infrastructure, that is, accessible school, accessible transport, accessible public offices by 2022. And then we have the Mental Health Care Act 2017. It ensures access to mental health services, at the same time prohibits the inhuman treatment of people with mental problems or mental issues. And next we have the National Trust Act 1999. This act supports the independent living for people with autism, cerebral palsy, and multiple disabilities. And then we have the Rehabilitation Council Act 1992. It provides, it regulates the training program for professionals who are dealing with the people with the disabilities. Coming to certain policies and schemes to support the people living with disabilities. First is the education support. We have the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which is focusing on inclusive education, and then we have scholarships and special educators under the for the people living with the disability under the Right to People with Disabilities Act 2016. And then we are focusing on skill development and employment. Here we have the Deen Dayal Disabled Rehabilitation Scheme, which is focusing on providing vocational training for people with disabilities through NGOs. And then we have the National Action Plan on skill development with a special focus on people with disabilities. And at the same time, we are also under the Right to People with Disabilities Act 2016. We have reservations for people with disabilities in institutions and education institutions and public employment. And coming to the social security, we have Indira Gandhi disability pension, and then we are providing assistive devices for people with disabilities under the ADIP scheme. And then we have a unique disability ID for streamlined benefits for people with disabilities. And coming to the health and the rehabilitation, we have the rehabilitation centers at the district level, and the universal coverage, that is the Ayushman Bharat provides universal coverage to everyone, including the people with disabilities. And we are providing training for the Anganwadi workers and Asha workers in the state level as well as in the national level for early identification of disabilities in the child. And it is also provided under the National Health Mission. And coming to the accessibility initiatives, we have launched the Accessible India campaign, which is focusing on physical, digital, and transport accessibility for people with a disability. And this scheme also ensures a mandatory audit of public places to ensure that these places are providing accessibility to people with disabilities. So in this topic, we discussed the relationship between malnutrition and the disability, and how the disability is leading to malnutrition, and the exacerbation of malnutrition, and how the malnutrition is leading to disability. And then we discussed a certain community based intervention to create an inclusive society for people with a disability. And then we discussed a certain government initiatives to support them. And based on this discussion, try to answer this mains practice question. The question is, how can disability inclusive nutrition policies promote social inclusion and reduce inequalities in India? Suggest measures to integrate these policies effectively at the grassroots level. This is a 15 marks question, and you have to write around 250 words. So this question has two parts. First part, you have to understand how can disability inclusive nutrition policies promote social inclusion. So that's what you have to write in the first part. You can write about how the nutrition for example, if you can identify the disability at the early stage, we can resolve the secondary complications associated with the primary disability. And through providing social economic access, we can reduce the inequality in the society. Through providing, through bringing accessibility to public transport, public offices and institutions, we can create an inclusive atmosphere for them in every aspect. So in this way, you can write the first part, and the second part, you have to write about the certain measures or policies adopted by the government from the grassroots level. For that, you can talk about the Haryana initiative. They are training the Anganwadi workers to identify the disability at the early stage. So these kind of initiatives you can mention, and then you can talk about the district rehabilitation centers. Then you have to talk about the national scheme and the state level scheme. So in this way, you can give an idea how these measures are taken from the grassroots level to the national level. and based on this understanding, try to answer the mains question and post it in the comment section. We will review and we will reply for your answer. Fairness, not just speed. The article is taken from the newspaper Indian Express, which is talking about the importance of a balanced judicial system which ensures both efficiency and fairness. In India, we have one of the best judicial systems in the world. It is integrated, at the same time it is independent from other influences, and it is approachable for every citizen in India. But at the same time, we also have certain challenges within our judicial system. For example, delayed justice due to the pendency of cases. At the same time, certain confusions between the other organs related to the appointment of judges. So these kind of issues are there. So in this article, we are going to see the basic features of Indian judiciary, the mode of appointment of judges in different courts. At the same time, we are going to see what are the reasons behind the pendency of cases in the courts, and then we will also see certain recommendations. First, we are going to start our discussion with the basic feature of Indian judiciary. Right, it is one of the organs of the government. The first organ is legislature, second is executive, and the third one is judiciary. Right. So these are the three organs, and in India, the judiciary is completely independent from the other two organs, that is executive and legislature. And coming to the first major feature, that is the integrated and independent judiciary, we have a unified system. It's a hierarchy. Actually, the court is a hierarchical system. At the top, we have the Supreme Court, then we have the High Court, then we have the subordinate courts, including the district court, sessions court, and all. And it is completely separated from the executive influence, because the court has the judges has a fixed tenure, and after that fixed tenure, they cannot work, they cannot serve. So there is no possibility for influencing them. At the same time, they are also having certain security against the influence of executive and legislature. And the next is judicial review. That is the court in India, that is High Court and the Supreme Court of India, has the authority to verify the constitutionality of an act passed by the legislature. And if they find that the act is not aligning with the constitutional principles, then they can declare the law invalid. And the next is the hierarchy of the courts, like I mentioned before. At the top, we have the Supreme Court, then we have the High Court, then we have the subordinate courts. And the next important feature is the public interest litigation. That we know that India is a diverse nation, and many communities are, they are marginalized in socially, economically, and all. So through this public interest litigation, other people can address the problems and issues of marginalized groups, or they can also resolve a public problem. And the next is the access to justice. So in India, we are providing free legal services to particularly targeting the marginalized communities and people who are suffered from natural disasters and all. And it is provided under the Legal Services Authority Act 1987. So Legal Services Authority. So these authorities are there in the taluk level, in the district level, in the state level, and even in the national level. So these authorities provide free legal aid and services to people who cannot afford the expenses of the court and all. And we also have Lok Adalats for quick resolutions of cases. And the next is the advisory role. The Supreme Court advises the President of India under the Article 143 of the Constitution regarding the constitutional matters. Coming to the second part, that is the judicial appointments in India. So it is one of the key areas of conflict too, right? Still we have confusions regarding the appointments, and we have certain concerns regarding the appointments of judges. And in the case of Supreme Court, it is done by the President under the Article 124. In the case of High Court also, it is done by the President, but in consultation with the Chief Justice of India, Chief Justice of High Court, or the Governor of the state. And in the case of subordinate court, the judges are recruited through the judicial service, the state judicial services and promotions, and that too under the provisions of Article 233 to 234. And regarding the next is the collegium system, and it is the area of conflict too, because it ensures judicial independence, but at the same time it lacks transparency and accountability. That means we don't know on what basis the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court Justice are selected. And regarding the appointment of the judges in 2015, the Parliament brought an act called the National Judicial Appointment Commission, and this commission this commission consists of Prime Minister, opposition leader, at the same time the election commission members. So they will recruit they will select the Supreme Court judges based on certain criteria. But unfortunately, in 2015, in the Najak case, the Supreme Court found that this is not aligning with the constitutional principles, because independence of judiciary is one of the basic structures of structural values of Indian constitution. But that is violated here. Citing that value is violated here, the Supreme Court struck down this National Judicial Appointment Commission Act. Coming to the third part, we are going to see the reasons behind the case pendency in the Indian courts. First one is a high case load. That in the year 2023 alone, nearly 4.4 crore cases are pending in the Indian courts, and this is mostly due to the lack of conclusion or resolution. And then the shortage of judges in India. Even though we have an integrated and independent judiciary, we are lacking, the judges to people ratio. That is, according to the Law Commission recommendation, we should have at least 50 judges per million people. But at present, we have only 21 judges per million meter. Coming to the third part, we are going to see the reasons behind the case pendencies in the court. The first major reason is the high case load. If you take the year 2023 alone, nearly 4.4 crore cases were pending in Indian courts, and mostly due to the unresolved disputes. And the next major reason is the shortage of judges. And according to the recommendation of the National Law Commission, we should have at least 50 judges per million people. But at present, we have only 21 judges per million people. And the frequent adjournments of the courts under the section 309 of the CRPC is another major reason for the case pendencies in the court. And next is the procedural complexities, that is the lengthy trials at different stages. And the vacancies, that is nearly 25% of judicial positions are still vacant in the subordinate courts. This significantly affects the efficiency of the subordinate courts to resolve the case, because the large number of cases will reach initially in the subordinate courts only. Once you can resolve the cases in the subordinate courts itself, then you can reduce the case pendencies in the high courts and as well as in the Supreme Courts. So this is not happening because of the lack of recruitment in the subordinate courts. And moving on to the next major reason is the inefficient case management. This is due to the lack of data-driven system to optimize the judicial process. And the next another reason is the limited technology adoption. That is, even though we have implemented the programs like e-courts and all, we are still not using it properly. So that is another major reason behind the pendency of cases. And then it is a litigation culture. This litigation culture is another major reason behind the overload of cases. For example, certain communities have a tendency to approach the court even for minute issues, and this can increase the burden of the court. And next is the underutilized ADR, that is alternative dispute resolution mechanism. So in 2023, the government of India brought the Mediation Act, right? So as per this Mediation Act, once the case reaches before the mediation board, then you should resolve the case before 90 days. The maximum length of that case should be 90 days. So we have such efficient schemes to reduce the burden on courts, but still we are not using it. And the next is the government litigation. And according to the estimation, nearly 46% of the cases that are pending in the courts are from the government disputes only. And this is often happens due to the improper coordination between the government or the departments. Now we are going to see certain solutions to address the case pendency. The first is strengthening human resources. That is, like I said, increasing the judges and the implementation of all India judicial services, so we can recruit the judges based on their merit and qualification, and the selection method will be more transparent. And the next is adopting technology, for example, expanding the opportunities and possibilities of e-courts, and also using artificial intelligence for prioritization of cases and all. Then we have the regulating adjournments. That means stricter guidelines enforcing stricter guidelines under section 309 of CRPC to to reduce the unwanted adjournments of cases. Then promoting alternative dispute resolution mechanism, for example enhancing the lok adalat and all. And then we have case prioritization. For example, we can use the AI for prioritization of cases, and at the same time we can also do the fast tracking cases for under trials and senior citizens and vulnerable groups, and thereby we can bring immediate justice for the marginalized communities. At the same time we can ensure that the judiciary is more inclusive. And the next is judicial reforms to ensure accountability. That is, we have to we have to implement the performance metrics for judges and courts. At the same time we have to encourage the timely judgments and transparency of the courts. And then reduce government litigation. That means we can do that through promoting the pre-litigation resolution policies. Like I already mentioned, 46% of the cases are pending in the courts are from government side only. So if we can resolve the conflict before getting into the litigation stage, then we can definitely reduce the burden on the court. And the next is developing infrastructure. That is modernizing courtrooms, libraries, and increasing the number of courts within the complex is very important. And sensitization and training, that is conducting programs and training programs for the judicial members and officers and judges to improve the efficiency. And finally, legal awareness. That is enhancing the awareness on rights, at the same time alternative dispute resolution mechanism. So in this topic we discussed what are the basic features of Indian Constitution. Then we discussed what are the reasons behind the pendency of cases in the court. At the same time we also gave recommendations that will be useful for our mains. The question is, India's judicial reforms must balance efficiency with fairness to ensure timely justice. Critically analyze the systemic challenges and suggest innovative solutions emphasizing the technology and alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So in this question you have to talk about two important parts. The first part, you have to understand or you have to present what are the challenges that we are facing in the Indian courts, for example the pendency of cases, and what are the reasons behind that. And the second part, you have to you have to give certain suggestions as solutions to overcome these problems. So just like I mentioned, now we can use AI for the prioritization of case. Then you have to talk about the training programs, and then you have to talk about the mediation bill. So in the second part, these are the things we have to address in the second parts. So try to answer the mains practice question based on this idea and post it in the comment section. We will review and reply for your answer. With this, we are coming to the conclusion for today's editorial analysis. If you like the video, hit the like button, give your feedbacks as comments, and share this content with your friends. And before leaving this channel, don't forget to subscribe and also hit the bell icon to receive on-time update from Shankar IAS Academy. Thank you.